My name's Brad Dacus, and I'm the founder of the Pacific Justice Institute. We got started about 1997, and it was interesting. At the time I was a Western coordinator for an organization back east called Rutherford, and then what happened is after 5 years, everything was going really smooth, and I was on cruise control. And what happens in life when you're on cruise control? That's right. A big cow gets in the middle of the road, and you have to go left or right, and have lots of hamburger meat. And that line works really good in Texas. So, but anyway, I used to live in Texas a good bit of my life. So, but anyway, so the national office called, said they were shutting down the regional office, offered me a position back east, promotion, head of the public affairs office in Washington, D.C., do all the media work. I said yes, and I had insomnia. Then I felt convicted. I needed to pray about it, and I did. And when I prayed about it, I felt convicted that I needed to be here on the West Coast because there'd be a huge void here on the West Coast, which there was. And so Pacific Justice Institute was born, and God, by His grace, came through on everything, giving us free office space and radio coverage. And our radio program is heard on about 100 stations now across the country, and the commentary is heard combined with that on almost 300 stations across the country now. So we're really having an impact in that regard as well. We do all our work without charge. We handle most of the case matters on the West Coast defending religious freedom, parents' rights, churches, all without charge. That's a miracle. A lawyer saying without charge. So anyway, but so that's what we do, and we have a lot of cases. We defend churches. We're told they can't build or they can't occupy a space because of land use or zoning use restrictions. We'd love to help churches overcome those, and you guys may be needing us down the road, depending on where God leads you to be. But the great thing is we have a Ninth Circuit victory on this. That was fantastic. They reversed the lower court opinion in San Francisco and held that cities cannot just keep churches from moving in buildings. It was a commercial building, just because of land use and zoning restrictions, which is huge, huge. We've also seen some victory regarding homeschoolers, the rights of parents to homeschool their kids, and that's a wonderful success. 3 judges said it was illegal to homeschool in California, 3 appellate court. We petitioned for them to rehear it. They decided to rehear the case, and they admitted that they were wrong, which is highly, I've never in my life as an attorney, constitutional lawyer, ever seen 3 judges rehear their own case and then change their mind and say they were wrong. But it was an incredible godsend because that's the only explanation, because they were so livid against us, even in oral argument. They changed their mind. It was a God intervention thing. And now we have more security for homeschooling in California than ever before, which is real important because of the next challenge, which is in the public schools. And we've had some issues where kids aren't allowed to invite kids to church. We had a girl who was punished for doing that, and we challenged. We had to file a lawsuit to get them to change their policy to let children invite each other, their friends, during recess at the church, so or mass. So that was a wonderful victory. And so we've seen this kind of case. We also see a lot of depravity coming into our public schools, like Planned Parenthood coming in the East Bay area, and advocating some. Let's see, where's my audience? Okay, good. They're young enough; they won't get it. But advocating some hideous things about transgenderism, and they call it the genderbread man. It's all the different kinds of combinations you could have, and different dimensions of orientation, and it's very confusing. And these are 14-year-olds. They had to do a checklist, and they signed off on this checklist. If they if these 14-year-olds said yes to everything on the checklist, that means they were ready to have sex. So thank you. So that's those are the kind of things that we're dealing with on that side. And then of course you have other concerns with regard to Common Core that we see possibly playing out, giving a tremendous unbridled discretion for, in some cases, for bad material to come into the classroom. But that's a whole other topic, and we'll go there. And but one of the recent challenges we've dealt with, though, is dealing with the recent Supreme Court decision dealing with marriage, and that is very, very concerning. In that it was a 5-4 decision. The basic philosophy of the majority of the Supreme Court by Kennedy, of all justices, he basically threw out the whole process of determining a fundamental right, which in the past we look at the history and the heritage, the laws of nature, and the constitutional history, and assessing the recognition of a fundamental right. Because fundamental rights aren't something that they create, it's something that from God that they merely recognize already exists. So they threw that out completely and instead adopted a very liberal, progressive kind of a philosophy. And instead they said, and I don't want to get too legally here, but basically what they said is that it's what they feel. The majority is opinion, or what they feel things should be. But when it comes to sexuality, though, they basically made it a fundamental right to be what you want. Now you're saying, oh, wait a minute, I thought it was just same-sex marriage. So basically what this opened up, and Justice Roberts in the dissent pointed this out, that this ruling is so broad. It wasn't just a narrow expansion of the Equal Protection Clause dealing with gender-based discrimination and gender choice, which is what I thought it was going to be. Usually that's what they do. Kennedy blew open the full doors, the barn doors, so to speak, and the Due Process Clause, and makes this basically a fundamental right for individuals to be able to be sexually satisfied, fulfilled in their relationships in very, very, very broad language. So broad that Justice Roberts, Chief Justice Roberts, in the dissenting opinion, he wrote what I would call Scalia style. The Scalia is like the prophet on the court, for verily, for ruin. I mean, he just says it like it is, okay? Justice Roberts usually is more diplomatic, but he just took a Scalia approach, just said it like it was, and said that this case, this rationale, opens the door for polygamy, and in fact justifies. He recognized everything that was said here in the rationale. There is no reason why polygamy and bigamy should not be ratified. He says it's a shorter leap to have bigamy and polygamy under this ruling than it is for same-sex marriage. So the concern is, and I see this as very real, not just conjecture, but more actually definitive, that there's a greater, in my opinion, probability more than 50-50 that we will see the Supreme Court, absent a correction in one of the judges, i.e. Ginsburg perhaps being replaced by the next president, depending on what that is, that we will see polygamy make its way up to the court, bigamy, trigamy, we have 3 of a kind, and adult incest. So those are some things that we're going to see because this decision is so broad, all of those are should win, slam dunk. And that's where we're at with that. So that's sort of the challenge. And then on the transgender issues, we have a law in California that lets boys go into girls' bathrooms and locker rooms. And right now it lets boys can go into girls' locker rooms and bathrooms in all of our California public schools. It's the law. I know. Yeah, I know. Are you visiting from Texas or no? Because when I talk to my people in Texas, they go, "Brad, this is a joke, isn't it? This isn't real." I say, "Yeah, it's real." I said, "But it is real, and it's sad because these kids who some of them are doing it just to do it but some of them have gender identity dysphoria. They need this a mental condition. We need love and compassion for them." But it's not compassionate, though, to that 13 or 14-year-old girl in a locker room who's taking off her clothes and about to get in the shower, and in comes a 16-year-old biological boy. And so there's an initiative that's being, we already had signed to get on the ballot, that signatures were invalidated. A lot of elderly people had their signatures invalidated because they determined that their signature looked different than when they first registered to vote. They had countless numbers invalidated. Or if a spouse printed the name and address of their spouse and then had their spouse sign it, both signatures were invalidated. So mine and my wife's were invalidated, I found out. And then one of our attorneys on staff, Matt McReynolds, his signature was invalidated because he had had eye surgery and his signature looked different than when he first registered to vote. And he's the one who testified before the legislature. So that's a real struggle and a real challenge. We're going to see also a resurgence in transgender rights, following the same path that we saw regarding homosexual rights and it's going to impact a lot of kids in our public schools. The textbooks are coming out in 2 more years, or 1 to 2 more years. The new textbooks, which statutorily are required to have homosexual and transgender role models at all grade levels in the history and social studies text and curriculum in California. So it's just what it's what it is. It's not what may happen. It is what statutorily is required to happen. So we have our work cut out for us. I'm going to do some Q&A, and so what your thoughts are, and yes.
Regarding Obergefell and what is probably going to be its progeny, is it your opinion that a lot of it is because, especially with Kennedy, have a belief that nothing should get in the way with what happens between two consenting adults, as I've heard of it on the radio, so to speak?
Yeah, and there's an interesting thing though. They say two consenting adults, right?
Right.
Okay, so it could have adult incest. Easily is justifiable for that. And that will also, I believe, with this decision, it just opens the barn door, like I said. But Justice Roberts, so it's interesting, he pointed out, he says, it's interesting that they say two. They mentioned two adults several times in the majority opinion. And Roberts said, but the rationale, their basis, there's no reason it should be limited to two. I mean, it's just convenient that they're saying two, but there's no justification for that. Why not 3? Why not 50? I mean, he didn't say 50, but he just spelled it out. They, to quote, I think it was Alito, I think it was Roberts. They said, maybe one of them said that there is not even a thin veneer of constitutional support for their decision. I mean, the justices of dissent, they're not that point blank on usually. Justice Roberts said, he said, those who are in favor of same-sex marriage have every right to celebrate this decision, but do not celebrate the Constitution, because the Constitution had nothing to do with it. That's from our Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. Justice Roberts just doesn't talk that way. For the first time ever in his career, he actually, of all the hundreds and hundreds of decisions he's been a part of and written, for the first time ever in his career, he actually read his dissenting opinion from the bench to go on record, because he was so resolved that this is a huge change in the direction of our philosophy. Also, it's interesting, when I read through the majority opinion, and then you read through 2 Timothy chapter 3, and you read through the philosophy, lovers of self, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of that which is righteous. You go right through it and you're thinking, like, basically the majority opinion legitimized what was prophesied in the last days under 2 Timothy chapter 3, in my opinion. It is, and the problem with that kind of legitimacy is serious, because in Sweden and other countries that have homosexual marriage, for example, same-sex marriage, a couple of things have happened. One is that important is they've noticed that the marriage has dropped. And in fact, in the United States that have already have same-sex marriage has dropped by 5% on average in those states that have it. And the reason is because people who are non-churched, often lower income, non-churched, they look at the law as their boundary. And then when the law changes, it then becomes okay. And that's very frightening. That's why the church is so critical and important, why it's so important for people of the Christian faith to raise their children in the way they should go now more than ever, because of those serious challenges. Justice Alito also said, I think I like what he said, if I'm paraphrasing, but he said, so according to the majority opinion, people have, their faith will be confined to their ability to whisper it in their homes at dinner, at the dinner table, but not dare to bring it outside where they live. Because the majority opinion deal with religious freedom, they limited it, and they said they recognize that this should not imperil individuals' rights to believe what they believe and teach what they believe. And Justice Roberts pointed out, it's interesting that they kept out the word exercise what they believe. So where the concern is that this is going to be a gateway for greater oppression by government when it comes to religious freedom. Justice Thomas pointed out that he can easily see the court taking this decision, actually the IRS taking this decision and using an oppressive way against religious institutions, Christian colleges, Notre Dame, universities, when it comes to their policies and about hiring and dealing with same-sex marriage, same-sex couples, same-sex sexual lifestyles. because in the case of Bob Jones University, that was a case where the IRS said, hey, your policy is deals with interracial dating, it's a civil rights issue. Is that time for me to be quiet? Oh, it's coffee. Okay, good. Okay, good. I thought this is really sophisticated. Wow, no, but
doesn't Hosanna act as a counterweight to that?
Hosanna? Okay, that's a good case. The Lutheran case. It does, but and that was a case dealing with the ability for religious schools to be able to have the say in terms of their policies regarding their faith, regarding their teachers and stuff, and that was a great good decision. But here's where it comes when Bob Jones is distinguished from that. That's a real good question. The Bob Jones case, we were dealing with interracial marrying and dating, and that was, they said, we don't allow this is not right for us, and they've changed, which is great since then. But the IRS came in and says, we're taking away your taxes and status, which is different, and then we're going to and no Pell Grants, and so they punished Bob Jones University for that. Well, Justice Thomas, looking at this rationale, making this a fundamental right, basically it statutorily opens the door for the IRS to come in and pounce all Christian college universities that advocate what the Bible and the Scriptures teach with regard to same-sex marriage and relationships. And so they're going to be on the chopping block, I think, in the not too distant future. We'll see college and universities. Then down the road, we can see this play out to challenge, I believe, churches and synagogues with regards to their tax-exempt status. If not on a federal level, then even on a state level. California, just a year ago, came just a few votes away. It already passed 2/3 of the state Senate. Just a few votes short in the state assembly would have been passed, probably signed into law. This law would have removed the state tax-exempt status for every nonprofit youth organization, including religious youth organizations that did not agree to hire homosexual or I say homosexual, I mean practicing homosexual or transgender youth leaders, and that narrowly passed. So we can now, even from the federal, we have a state level, we can see some issues too. I'm sorry, questions? Go ahead. Yes.
Sure. I had a question. So, for you, you were able to work in a very obviously important and dynamic sphere of the legal world, right? And affecting the way these things are, adjudicated. Right. To what extent do you think that the legal sphere is a kind of a trailing indicator of a different cultural sphere? And for those of us who are not in the legal world, so to speak, like perhaps we're in a moment where it's getting worse and will continue to get worse, so to speak. Right. But when that begins to move the other direction, so to speak, what things can we work towards in a non-legal sense?
Yeah.
Because I think the culture, like you had a very good point about like rights, and that, hey, we have our First Amendment rights too. Every right comes with a cost. Right. If you look at the Americans with Disabilities Act, it's very expensive to provide handicap ramps and buildings and things. But we're willing to bear those costs because we care about the life and quality and accessibility for So the same for religious rights. Other people have to maybe deal with the inconvenience of not having their desires met because of my religious beliefs.
Right.
So how can we build like the cultural, in a sense, like resilience or the sense where people are willing to bear those costs for us out of compassion, where I think right now maybe it's a very hostile atmosphere for religious freedom generally.
You get people on the other side to bear the cost for religious freedom and understand. I think communicating them the importance of religious freedom and why it's a fundamental right in the Constitution. It's a fundamental right in the Constitution, not because religion is always popular or because everyone has the same religious beliefs. In fact, in our colonies, it was quite divided, and someone from Georgia going to church in Maryland or Massachusetts and Pennsylvania, they were very divided, and they realized we need to protect religious freedom because we don't want to become oppressive. So I think that's part of it, the importance of religious freedom. Also, though, it's cultural engagement. Let me just dovetail a little bit on this, but I think it's really important. Because often in the Christian world, particularly as an attorney, we often focus on the legal and the political, and we think if we get this person elected, we get these laws passed, or we get these cases, then we're going to take care of America. And the hardcore reality is this decision, this majority decision, 5-4, is reflective of where our nation is right now. And many people say, no, that's not true. I look at the studies of the polls and things, we are drifting very quickly in that direction. So socially, how do we engage in that? And part of it is, I think that God sort of put this on my heart, is how do we connect with them? I was once speaking at a prayer breakfast up in Santa Clarita, and they said, look, there's 24 demonstrators with a banner and rainbow flags outside, but don't worry, you won't even see them. They'll be brought in this way. And so there I am, watching them put all the things, getting it in the morning, getting all together. And I just felt this conviction in my heart saying, Brad, you shouldn't be in here. You should be out there. And I didn't tell them because otherwise they would have freaked and, no, they brought an entourage with me, which would have been a disaster. So I just snuck out and went right to the demonstrators were and had this big banner attacking me. I didn't see what it said. I went behind it. But on this big banner and a big megaphone, you know. And so I walked up to them. And I said, hi. I said, I'm Brad Dacus. I'm going to be speaking here this morning. And I'd really love it if you guys could come and hear what I have to say. And I said, and by the way, I says, I just want you to apologize to you guys because, you know, I said a quote at a Prop 8 rally about how the church needs to learn from its complacency in World War II, and not to make the same mistake of complacency about standing up for what's right and wrong. And people misinterpret that to say I was saying that homosexuals were like Nazis or as bad as Nazis. And that was never my intent. And 90% of a misunderstanding is from the sender, not the receiver. So I want you to know I really feel bad about that, and I apologize for that. In fact, I didn't even realize I'm going to be addressing it this morning when I talk, because they want me to stay totally away from it. And it was like, I mean, this was big time risk on both sides. And one of them says, oh, okay, I may go. And the other one says, interesting, he says, well, you just think we just chose to be this way, right? You think I just chose to be a homosexual? I said, and the Lord quickened me on this, and I says, as a matter, notice how I responded. I said, as a matter of respect for you as a person, I want to make this really clear. I says, I do not believe you just suddenly flipped a switch and chose to have these feelings. I says, not at all. I said, as a matter of respect for you as a person, I want you to understand that. That's very important to me. I said, now I could have stopped right there. And they went, oh, so he agrees with me. No. Then I said, now, we may disagree about how those feelings developed. We may disagree about how those feelings should be dealt with. I said, but the fact that you didn't just choose to have those feelings, I said, that's very important as a matter of respect for you that you understand that, where I come from. And he's still looking at me like, that sounds, and I'm not sure, you know. But the other guy, so I went and did my talk, and I went and addressed word for word my quote from the Prop 8 rally, clarified it, and it was really awesome how God really blessed that. And the guy, one of the flag bearers, banners attacking me, came up afterwards and shook my hand and says, I'm really glad I heard what you had to say. I realize where your heart's at. You know, in other words, translated, you're really not a hate monger. Because that's what they think. And I said, I'll meet with anyone. Because I know if I sit down and talk with them, they'll see the love of Christ, and they'll see that I love and value them as human beings. They just disagree with them, but I don't talk down to them because I'm a sinner too, you know. But and so anyway, it was great. So and then afterwards, the guy who wrote an article saying anti-gay to speak at prayer breakfast, he wrote this big article, journalist. He came up to me with his little, you know, doing his radio thing too because he does radio stations. And after his interview with me, right afterwards, he turned it off, and then his eyes started watering. He says, "You may not know this, but I owe you a big apology." So I wrote this article and da-da-da about you, and I just see that I was so wrong. I said, you know, that's okay. You didn't know who I was. I say, is you married? Yes, I'm a wedding ring. My goal was to connect. You wedding married? He goes, yeah. I said, you a father? Well, how many kids do you have? I said, I'm a dad too. I said, we sat down, we talked about being a father and having kids. I thought I could connect there. I don't know where else he's from. But you know, if anyone attacks me, that man will be defending me. Because he knows my heart, where my heart is, even if theologically, I don't know where he is. And, but that's sort of what I realized we need to be doing. We need to be engaging, interacting. Also, I was on a television broadcast down in San Diego. And this man who was transgender, 2 weeks earlier had arranged this demonstration in front of our office in Santa Ana, about a dozen people. And you know, how much time do I have, by the way? I want to make sure I stick on time.
It's 10:45. 10 minutes or so.
Okay, good. I'll wrap this up because I want to make sure I have more questions. Thank you. Because it's dangerous for a lawyer not having a time card. So, anyway, so I wanted to meet with him. I really wanted to connect with this guy. And And so that's sort of on my heart to do that. And so I meet with him. So anyways, we're on the same, 2 weeks later, we're on the same TV show talking about something on this panel. He's right on my left. And as it turns out, I said, at the break time, I said, this may sound crazy, but do you mind if we get together and talk sometime? And he said, sure. I did talk afterwards. And I'd like to really get to know you. I'd like to understand you better. It really helped me. It wasn't, I want to debate you. No, it was different. He said, sure, we can do that. We met for over 3 hours, about 3.5 hours. He cried 3 times when I was talking, sharing his past and his pain. And he knows my background. He knows what I believe. And he knows I'm a Christian. And at the end he says, you're very different than what I thought. I said, you mean I'm not a hard-nosed, cold-hearted, hate-filled, right-wing extremist? He goes, yeah, you're not that way at all. I said, well, thank you. I said, you're different too, So the answer is a long answer, but I think we need to be, as a church, and as Christians, we need to be resolute on what we believe and not apologize for it. This is what we believe, number one. And number two, though, we need to be engaging relationally with showing love and respect for them. The same way Christ showed love and grace to the woman at the well. He could have just slammed her and just, you worthless scumbag, I'm not going to, But he showed love and grace and value to her at the same time, in the end, not holding back on the truth. First step, though, is relationship and showing love and respect for people. Then when they see that, then we win the opportunity to share with them the hope of Christ. And also I've learned another thing too. In my background, I used to think it was first you focus on how a bad sinner they are. And if someone had done that to me, I'm not sure I would have ever walked down that aisle as a boy. But we're all sinners, but to focus them on Christ and to get them to understand who Jesus is. So there's the hope of redemption and a new life. As opposed to, like, some of these people, these signs saying homosexuals are all going to hell.
Westboro.
Yeah, like the Westboro, that little cult group.
Yeah.
And they are a little like, they're half the 16 members are all related or something. Just real, and there's no hope of Christ. There's no hope of love and forgiveness through Jesus. And that's a powerful part of the word that we have as followers of Jesus. So, anyway, I think I'm theologically, everything I've said is pretty safe so far. So anyway, I had to deviate off a little bit there, but thanks for letting me come. So is there any more questions at all before I close out? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I was just wondering, what other organizations you work with? Like, I really, really love the Beckett Fund. They're like, do you work with them, or what other groups do you work with?
The Beckett Fund, like based out of Massachusetts?
No, they're
Out
in
of
DC.
DC.
Oh, okay.
I thought they made out of Massachusetts. I'll get the joke. You say yes, and I say never heard of them. No. They are actually a great organization. They did some really good work. The Hobby Lobby case was excellent. Yeah, we actually, like when they file something, we'll sometimes file a front of the court brief, or we'll file a case, they'll file a front of the court brief. We're on the same page. Excellent organization. We do the bulk of the work on the West Coast are handled by the Pacific Justice Institute. That said, Dacus does some great work. Some other great organizations too out there. Yeah, that's a good one. So, any other questions? Yes.
I'm a credential school nurse.
Yes.
And I was just wondering, because in the course of my credential program, they did, I found out that in the state of California, if I come across a teen parent, I have to give them information that abortion is an option, and that's strongly against my beliefs. But what are the options legally that I can that are available? Because it seems like the only option is to say I can't have anything to do with that and step away because of violence.
Say I can't help you, but I am.
Yeah,
there is. You can send that to the clinic.
Legally it's required in California that I send that I give them information.
That's how happening is.
Yeah, I'd like to look at that. We may have a lawsuit. We may have.
I then the only option is to not involve myself at all. But
Yeah.
then if people like me who believe in life don't involve ourselves, then
You're
what
right.
does that mean?
Yeah, I've had teachers who say, okay, so I'm not going to do this, and I'm just going to stay home and go have a substitute do it. I'm like, okay, so you're going to hand the rifle to someone else to do the shooting? I'm like, so I think you've got it. You're on the right track. I'd like to take a look at that and see exactly what the specific mandate is, and then work. Actually, this is a great challenge for us. And then work as far as policy on how to help people like you get around the explicitness of the mandate. There's almost always a way of working it. Like for example, like in schools, if they're required to teach, say, like evolution to kids, and there's some kids out there who don't believe in evolution, you know, and there's teachers that don't believe in it, or they're young Earth or old Earth, either way. And how do they deal with that? Instead of staying home, you know, I say, well, yeah, you do what you're required to teach, say this, this, and this, but also you're also required by state law and the education code to give critical thinking for all theories. So you can also say, it's an interesting point. There's a number of interesting points things to point out here. First off, what's the probability of this happening? Another question I ask as far as this thing, what's the probability? And there's all these missing links in multiple genetic mutations. Anyways, what I'm trying to say is that when it could be a terrible thing, still actually could open up a window that allows dialogue and you maybe able to take advantage of. We step into the mandate. So good question. Very good. I like your heart. I like where you're going with that. That's good. Because it's not just about you. It's about the kids. And that's your focus, which is good. I like that.
In the same vein as her position, Planned Parenthood has completely infiltrated the public schools, and I think I've heard inklings of eventually having like health centers there for the kids and stuff. What would happen to a nurse with ethics? Would she just be obsolete? Because, you know, Planned Parenthood, they're here for us.
Yeah. Oh.
We're my unified is $5,000 a year.
Oh, yeah.
To teach all the health classes
Yep.
at the high school level.
All the whole state does, all
Yeah,
Orange
no.
County, they teach it everywhere in Orange
So is
County.
Planned Parenthood is everywhere in Orange County?
Oh yeah,
It's
they're
everywhere.
everywhere. They're
It's in LA.
contracted with the departments of education and stuff, but, which is crazy in
But-
Orange County.
I
like
got
it.
them to not teach
Yeah.
at my daughter's middle school this year.
Yay.
No, I know that because I used to represent the clinics in Orange County, and so
Yeah.
between Hathaway and
Uh-huh.
the Planned Parenthood.
Well, the Orange County Board of Supervisors and Education, the Orange County Board of Education, I don't know if they have any ability saying that, but they've got 3 votes on there that I know would definitely be opposed to that. But they may not, maybe just
Yeah,
school
more
district by
like-
school district,
More
probably.
like kind of set up some, like, he was sort of the in-between and got some
Right,
things for them,
right.
like,
Anyway, but you're right, getting them booted out and getting people replaced with more responsible entities, hospitals, for example. That school district I was telling you about as far as the 2 Planned Parenthood people coming in all that garbage, that was 1 high school in the school district. The other 2 high schools, one chose Kaiser Permanente and the other chose a medical and an established institution. So there is often sometimes local control even at the school level to look at. So yeah, that's an important question. The big overview picture, I think it's real important, is like when we look at 2 Timothy chapter 3, it talks about what's going on, this is the bad stuff, this is the challenges in the last days. Specifically it says in the last days, this is what you will see. Lovers of self, etc. And then before you get to chapter 4, the Apostle Paul, St. Paul, is real clear on our response, which is to be in the Word and be followers of the Scriptures and to be resolute. And I think that the body of Christ is going to be exhorted more than ever to choose to be more fervent in their faith and following of Scripture and the following of Jesus than ever before. So it means there's going to be a lot of buffeting that comes with people. Are you going to choose to be a true follower of Jesus, or are you going to give away to and be compromisers? So the wheat from the chaff, I think, is we're going to see more and more of that take place. And one great thing I like about the Catholic Church is they're very resolute and very solid in their convictions. Anyway, thank you for the opportunity to be here. I really appreciate it. Thank you.